Welcome back, biological anthropology lecture students. Okay, so this lecture is part two for Tuesday the 24th. Okay, so we had just talked a little bit about what a species is and how speciation sort of works, right? Now here's some other things we have to think about too. What are the technical terms? Okay, so species can form in two different ways, right? And I mean, they seem to shift in two different ways, right? In other words, one species can just become another wholeheartedly, right? This species just tracks on and becomes another species without splitting. Now, if that happens, the term for that is called anagenesis. And you'll see these terms on the slideshow, right? That slideshow, The Forces of Evolution, which is again posted below, okay? Now, the other thing that can happen is called cladogenesis. Cladogenesis, right? In other words, this species split into. While both these processes are going on, we've got to think about which happens more frequently, right? So, if all life, of course, on Earth started with just one species, right? If everything changed by anagenesis, how many species do we have right now? The answer is one, right? And of course, we don't see that because on that slide you're going to see that even today we have 14,441,900 declining, sadly declining species on Earth. And most of that has been propagated along through cladogenesis, the splitting of it, right? Again, it's DNA, nature's attempt to enter every available niche to resist extinction, right? But they both sort of work together, okay? So cladogenesis and anagenesis are very important terms for us to sort of get under our belts. All right. Now, also, when we think about species changing or not changing, what do we actually see? Whether if it's anagenesis or cladogenesis, what I mean by what we see, we look at, I mean, is the rate. I mean, how fast do species form? Is it slow? Is it fast? Is it uneven? The thing about it is that Charles Darwin, wrote in The Origin of a Species that things, change gradually over time. It's not always that way. In fact, what we see are species that can change gradually through time and then actually level off, and there's very little change, right? And the next we know, we see a rapid change, and when that rapid change occurs, it's called punctuated equilibrium, right? So we punctuate up and then we level off again, like a staircase, right? Um, this is really what we actually see in the fossil record many times, because speciation events are often organisms moving into new environments, right? And that means that whatever changes that happen to them may be successful because they don't have competition within various niches. So they can change and pulse very rapidly to enter the environment. Once competition sets in, everything begins to change slowly because it's very hard to get a successful mutation when there's so much competition, right? So punctuated equilibrium is a lot about what we see in the evolutionary record. So we always have to think about it's not always gradual. But when it does staircase and ramp up, we need to be looking at the environment to figure out, what's allowing for these organizations to be successful. And when they are successful, when they increase and pulse very rapidly in a staircase, we have a special term for that. And that's called an adaptive radiation. Okay? These are special moments in where some new mutation in some organism forms allow them to acquire a whole different niche that wasn't there before. And we can see that this thing just radiates in all different directions, right, through punctuated equilibrium. Now, we humans have done that a few times in our evolutionary past, so we kind of want to have that concept down. So there is an actual slide on that one. Okay. Now, there are sections also in the slides that I have up here I want you aware of that we're not going to be discussing because we just have to, we don't have class time. So, things like the Hardyweinberg equilibrium are slides that I have posted on that. Just ignore that. If I haven't discussed it in my video lectures or haven't, prescribed it in some of the readings for you, it's no game, all right? So I'm just talking about the major important contributions that you actually really need to know about. All right. So the last thing we want to talk about, and this deals with Darwin's idea of sexual selection. Okay, and Darwin knew that things changed by natural selection, all out competition, right? But he didn't even understand this idea called sexual selection. Okay, and that means the traits in which we see that are differently between males and females. And those traits are many of those things are driven um, by sexual attraction. Okay? And they don't always work for natural selection. In fact, there can be an antagonistic sort of relationship. So think about it. You've got a thing like a chicken, right? So you got female hens and male roosters. There's obviously a difference. In other words, that male rooster needs to display to be able to get a hen. But the thing about it is, all that display stuff, the big neck and all the colors and stuff, don't necessarily work in the rooster's favor when it comes to getting food. In fact, they can be antagonistic or against it. They could actually cause natural selection against him. So when we think about sexual selection, it can also work antagonistically against natural selection because we have to think about this too. That evolution is a system. And when we say system, it doesn't necessarily mean to be perfect. There can be trade-offs, and sexual selection definitely is a trade-off in that section, this whole thing, right? Now, we have to think about also when we're talking about sexual selection is that why do we see this tremendous competition and differences between males and female, right? It has a lot to do with the molecular stuff, right? Because it's essentially this: when you get right down to it, males in all species generally have to compete for females because females you are less reproductively you have less reproductive capacity than males do. Okay, so females you cannot spread your genes continuously. You just can't. I mean, first of all, when you're impregnated, you're down for that period of time. And then every couple of week, a month, you're down for that time. And then after generally the age of 50, you're going to go through menopause and you're completely out of it. But males are fertile all the time once they hit puberty. So we have a higher reproductive capacity. Those with a higher reproductive capacity always have to compete for those with a lower reproductive capacity. Thus, generally in nature, you're always going to see males being more colorful, that need to display and or that need to fight. Okay, so display and fighting are what we call show, right? Display or show, and fight is a form of showing. Males generally have to do this to gain females, and you'll see that tendency in every species, including males. We fight for you, except for me because I don't care. Take her, just to go. I don't want to get hurt, right? But it's the way it is, and that's what drives size differences, because males have had to compete for females. Those that are more successful are larger. We can do battle against other males, and win the sexual, whatever it is, contact. Therefore, breeding bigger males, right? And you can see that in every single species in the world. So when we're talking about humans and the formation of species too, we have to consider that also. So have a look at those slides and think about what it actually means to be a show and display, and think about it in actual behavior too. And males, owe to yourself that we actually do display a lot more than we're willing to let the females know, right? There you go. Okay. I will have another lecture for you on Wednesday, right? Or maybe even Tuesday, that talks about the material that we're going to talk about on Wednesday to continue the subject matter. Take care.